yeah, thanks for joining us again. We're been doing this series now for a few months, and we've been talking about misalignment, disengagement, and resistance to change. And we pretty much covered that off now, I think. So we're going to start using more generic titles. And the first one is Lean was never about tools. So, I mean, it's very interesting to think that, Lean has promoted this tool-based approach, and now the generic conversations and the rhetoric in the market is that Lean is never about tools. So it's very different for what we've been hearing for the last 20 or 30 years. But as far as we're concerned, it wasn't Lean that was never about tools. It was TPS. It was the original tool production system. Lean was always about tools, right? And it has been forever. Now it hasn't really delivered against every single promise and outcome. We're starting to see that language is changing in the market, and of course we've been banging this drum for the last 25 years. So, and we do it through a neuroscience lens. That's what we're going to talk about today. So, good. Let's move on. Let me click there, and that should work. Oh, let me get back over here, letting people in as they come along. So, yeah, we're in this situation. We've got, I think, putting it sensibly, a massive misunderstanding of Lean because the way Lean interpreted TPS. So what we really want to say is a massive misunderstanding of Toyota production system and what was sitting behind it. And, as you can see on the screen, a lot of organizations, the stuff, Kaizen, we've put 4S on purpose because everybody knows it's 5S. But what is interesting is Toyota don't do 5S, they do 4S. And the reason they only do 4S is because the sustain bit, the last step, isn't required, because the people believe in what they're doing, so they do it anyway. And when we brought it across to the West and we tried to make it into a process that we talk to people and ask them to do, or in some cases force them to do, that didn't stick, and therefore we added sustain because we saw that it wasn't working. And it's a little bit, we're the same with waste elimination and under the banner of MUDA and continuous improvement, the 8 wastes. We call it the 8 wastes now. It started as the 7 wastes because it was production focused. And then we realized there was something missing, and we added the 8th waste, which was untapped creativity. It was that bit about digging into the people piece and bringing people along with you. And that's about as good as it's been for the last 20 or 30 years. But actually what we can see now, and we'll show you today, is that if you flip that completely and put people first, then everything else follows. And that's exactly what Toyota did. It's exactly how they've been able to sustain high performance in global terms for the last 90 years. And it's the bit we're still missing, and what we believe neuroscience explains. We can even see in some of the seminal books, Lean Thinking, there was Porsche, there was Wire Mold. They've since not been able to sustain their approach to what was then considered lean and develop their own ways of doing things. So Toyota do stand alone, and they stand alone in what they achieve because of their culture. But again, culture is not a lever. It's not something you can produce. It's something that is an outcome. It's an emergent property of human beings relating to each other in good ways. And the only way people do that is by their brain function. So let me hang on, fiddle with buttons again and make sure I can change screens. Why? Biggest thing is disengagement, and disengagement, biggest precursor to disengagement is misalignment, and misalignment means people see the world in different ways, and that means that their neurons are wired to fire differently. But it becomes stressful. So we've got these huge statistics from Gallup that have been popular and promoted for the last 3 or 4 years all over the world, which is hovering around the 80% disengagement mark and 40 to 50% stress mark. So we have to ask the question, why are managers disengaged? And the answer is we don't understand what it means for human beings to believe in something being good, bad, right or wrong, i.e. 5S or waste elimination, and we don't get those beliefs aligned in the first place, and that's what leads to the disengagement. And we end up with a lot of emotional and rational conflict between people with these different brain wiring patterns firing in different ways, and that's where we're at. So we're in a very privileged position today to and I'm still fiddling with buttons to try and get things to work the right way, to be in the presence of my esteemed business partner, Levent, who, if anybody on the call doesn't know, or watching this later doesn't know, worked for Toyota for 16 years in various directorships before becoming country president, and has got deep knowledge of how it actually works from the inside, which is rare in today's market. So, we can start looking at and asking Levent now, how I've done the sort of introduction bit, about the real secret behind Toyota's success, because it is about human behavior, and it's the way that how people relate, that behavior, the conduct, the respect leads to the culture that supports the development of solutions, and not the other way around. You don't go in with tools first, train them, and get solutions coming out the other end, or a proper decent culture coming out the other end, I should say. So, we've got phrases in the market now like psychological safety, but it's more than that. There's Hito-Zakuri. Levent, do you want to add a couple of words in there, mate? Because I mean, obviously we defer to your greater knowledge at this point, so I want to get you to do more of the talking.
Okay. As we all know, Lean was trying to copy Toyota production system since 1980s, 84s. But you cannot copy what you cannot see. So culture and relationship between people is not easy to observe and copy. That was the missing piece in Lean implementation, and now most of the people are realizing it. So if you look at what was missing in the approach, these are some of them. Psychological safety was an important factor. All the management is trying to produce a psychological safe environment for people. Lifelong learning is another important factor in Toyota culture. And Toyota deeply trusts their people. They respect them. And Hito-Zakuri, building people means building people in Japanese, has equal weight to Monozukuri, which is building things. So Toyota is not only producing things, they're also developing people. And neuroscience aligned leadership. Of course, when Toyota production system is developed at Toyota, neuroscience was not that developed. But under the light of today's neuroscience, we now understand that whatever Toyota has been doing is fully aligned with the science, with how our brains are designed to work. That's why it's successful. So if you need to understand why Toyota production system is successful, we need to better use neuroscience light to investigate. And ownership at every level. Of course, if you provide such an environment to people, they want to create value, and they have ownership at every level, which is a natural consequence of that culture.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, mate. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to the next slide and get you to keep talking, to be honest. So over to you, mate. Carry on.
Okay. Lean was a set of tools, because while Lean is developed, it was perceived as a set of tools. Toyota production system was perceived as a set of tools. But with our perspective, if you look at from today's neuroscience perspective, tools cannot change beliefs. Tools can only control behaviors. What change behaviors are beliefs. These beliefs are called principles at Toyota, and Toyota principle-based practice is very, very important. So Toyota's principles, everybody in the company tries to act according to those principles. So every action in turn reinforces principles or beliefs. So every day they follow the same system. Their belief in the system is becoming stronger and stronger. What's more important than that? Their beliefs become more aligned.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just going to sort of reinforce the bullet points on there in terms of the words actually used. Tools control behavior. Neurological, psychological perspective, we don't respond well to imposed control. Human beings, we need autonomy. We need to be able to predict our own safety in different timelines ahead, and be able to assess the world and work out if we're still going to remain safe. To impose control works against that system, so it makes people more uneasy fundamentally. So all the time we try and impose systems and control mechanisms that make sure people do things the right way without them believing in it being the right way to do it. We have this negative impact on the neurochemical mix, the emotional state of the human brains in that situation, in that environment. So what we've got to do is help people understand and believe in why the things that a business needs to control are important, And when they do, their behavior naturally changes in lines to that. So that's my take on that slide as well. So next one. Again, I'll start with this one. The brain determines behavior, right? I mean, that if we think about it, this seems to be a massive disconnect in understanding for me in the world. And I put it down to the language we've had up till now and why neuroscience language shifts the understanding so significantly. And it's because nothing we do. I was having this conversation with my daughter in the car this morning. She popped up from university in London to go and see a physio, and we had a little trip back and forth to the train station, and we had a really good chat. And it was, how have we got to a position where every single aspect of our experience in life, every emotional response we have, every physical thing we do, the fact that we're here talking, using body language, pitch and tone of voice comes from vocal cords, all controlled by the central sulcus, the fine motor control in the brain. And even, we were talking to the physio about all sorts of things, so especially collagen levels and how muscles need to work to clean themselves up, and how water helps flush out negative parts around muscles before you can build up and get them stronger. All of those things that are going on in the body physiologically are connected through hormones and neurotransmitters to the way the brain functions. So how we sleep, what we eat, everything we do, it all changes the chemical state of our brain and body. And that chemical state is our live experience of the world. So we can't experience the world without the brain. And yet we can try and focus on this behavior level and tool level without understanding the origin of behavior, which is people's brains. So, that seems really confounding to me these days, because I've been speaking about brains for 26 years. And what we've done is we've simplified it and kept it into this simple model: believe, think, feel, act. Belief, we mean wiring. You've got neurons, they fire. The firing of those neurons is thinking. How we feel is the chemical component that's involved in that firing process as well. And that has to happen before we can act. It has to happen to send a signal to muscles that control our mouth, our tongue, our vocal cords to even speak, to blink, to give micro signals from facial expression. Everything comes from the brain. So if we don't understand that and what leads to people's decisions, actions, attitudes, behaviors, how can we expect to positively influence it and not make mistakes and trigger it to go in the wrong way? And when we use that as our filter, as our view of the world, and we look back at what Toyota promotes, and again, I've got the great privilege of working with Levent for the last 6 years and hearing all this internally, we've had great opportunities to look at what Toyota does, look at the tools, look at 5S as an act of respect, think about it in terms of the signals it's sending to the brain and the psychological response that will lead to, and go, oh yeah, tick the box, tick the box. So we can genuinely say that, the way Toyota approaches what we've all tried to replicate for decades works with the brain. And what we see as best practice and the philosophy we've got of tools first rather than people first, the monozukuri over hitozukuri kind of approach, rather than keeping that in balance, works in many cases actively against the brain. And therefore we wonder why we talk about disengagement, burnout, resistance to change. These are all normal, natural neural responses to the environment a human being has to survive. So it's leaders creating the environment that trigger the best neural responses that we need to be focused on. And if we don't get that bit right, nothing else we do, CapEx, tools, training, L&D programs, they will not land how we want them to, because we're just triggering the brain to resist and respond and have a psychological away from response more than we need them to. So that's that. I'm going to shut up and let them get a word in edgeways again now. Next slide, mate, is this one. Over to you.
Yes, these are some of the reflections we have taken from our previous participants who have attended the BTFA online course. Previously, they were complaining about these problems. We have trained the tools, but nobody is using them. And after the program, most of them, about 95% of them, are satisfied, and they say we shifted how people saw the purpose of the tools, and suddenly they use them willingly. So BTFA online course provides them a framework through which they can understand whys behind tools. So when they understand whys and when they believe in it, their beliefs will be aligned and they will pull together in the same direction.
Yeah, and it comes back down to that prediction machine. The brain is a prediction machine. We need reasons why to be able to work out if we're going to be safe or not, or whether something's going to be a benefit or not, or a threat. And if we don't, this is where time pressure and the global shift and drift towards in quarter, in month returns and end of month financial outcomes. As much as there's an argument for that being practical and pragmatic. It drives behaviors that undermine everything else, that undermines culture, that undermines safety and security. So we've got to give people reasons why. And if we haven't got the time to connect and communicate, we don't get the opportunity to do that. So, it's got to be a balance between the pragmatic running a business from a financial position, because we have to make profit and therefore we have to reduce costs and increase efficiencies. But you're going to get much more of those ideas about how to do that from the people. If we alienate the people because they're too much under control, you're not going to get that continuous improvement culture that everybody's been striving to replicate. So it seems so obvious. It really does once you look at it, but you need to be able to consider this through this neuroscience lens for it to really make any sense. So, I mean, what we can say, BTFA fixes, and it does, and we've been doing this for 3 years now around the world with different leadership teams, and genuinely, everything becomes clearer. People become more engaged because it changes the way leaders at all levels in a business behave and act, because they choose to, knowing what outcomes they're trying to achieve in the other person they're communicating to. We've seen massive shifts in people's approach. Who previously would argue that this is the way you lead, and once they understand the brain function, the neuroscience, that belief shifts, and therefore their behavior shifts. It's BTFA in action, right? So disengagement improves, or reduces. Engagement improves. Confusion is clarified. Things that people didn't quite understand why they were going on suddenly make so much more sense. Once you add this into your people, process, systems analysis and considerations, mistakes that have been repeated in the past disappear, because you then get to real root cause of, we've been triggering these brains to react in the wrong way. Now let's change this cause so the effect of that, mistakes being repeated because of the human element disappear. Slow decisions go away, fast decisions are made with more confidence. People own the problems more. There's a higher level of ownership, and resistance just dissipates and disappears because everyone is aligned, much more easily aligned to how do we create the best conditions in which brains can perform at their best, much more, because that's a benefit for them, much more than they can be aligned to how do we get the most profit, for the shareholders, or end of quarter, end of month results that actually don't really impact us because we're too far detached from it all, on a shop floor or supervisory level. So those are the kind of things that we're seeing in practice. But it's fascinating that it just requires the education and introduction of neuroscience to get that shift, whereas the last few decades of promoting lean and teaching the tools, which Levent and I have both done as well, don't work so well. So it's fascinating to see. Do you want to add anything to that, mate, before we move on?
No. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So there you go. Back over to you. I'll let you. Let's try and balance up the amount we're talking. If we're talking about balance, over to you, mate.
I was lucky enough throughout my professional career to work for big corporates, and that's why I had the great opportunity to take a lot of trainings, leadership development trainings, etc. Now I can easily see that they are too conceptual. They ignore emotions. They don't change beliefs. And some of the trainings don't ignore emotions, like EQ trainings, etc. But the language used is not so easy to understand. So these kind of trainings cannot establish new beliefs around which everybody will unite and understand each other and connect. So these were the missing points. What we tried to develop with BTFA is to introduce a simple, scientific, practical language. So in a company, senior leadership team and frontline employees can understand it the same way. So since we introduced this very simple language, they can use it to communicate in their daily life. It is powerful because when we look at why strategies fail, most frontline employees don't understand what is meant and why in strategic documents. With this simple language, their strategy deployment and Hoshinkanri approaches will be much more effective and sustainable. And in short, what we are trying to establish is to teach people, leaders, how to engage emotionally with other people in their organization. And what you see at the bottom is PDCA. Of course, you know PDCA very well from continuous improvement, from Deming. It's called Deming cycle. PDCA is how we work usually in workplaces, but it is unfortunately not the way our brains work. Our brains work, as we see on the right, BTFA. We believe something, we think according to what we believe, we feel according to what we think, and we act according to what we feel. So most of our decisions are emotional, whether we accept them or not. So any approach or strategy in the business should involve or should include this idea about how brain works. So if we can balance the emotional world and the rational world at workplace, we can create a condition where brains will work at their best.
Brilliant. Thank you, mate. Hopefully that all makes sense. Yeah, it's about striking the balance. We can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We can't say we've been doing too much PDCA, now we've got to do BTFA. That would cause all sorts of different problems. You know, it would be very much too soft and fluffy and tree hugging, some of the terms we hear often anyway. And that's the problem most of the time when we look at what is available in the market under the human, centric kind of banner. It is soft and fluffy because it's subjective and ambiguous. What we do with the science is make it absolutely practical, which is here's the process. This is how people are designed to function. This is what will happen if you do this. So this is what you've got to do differently to get that. It becomes very much more clinical. But it's not about going too far down any road. It's the same with all things in life. If you've ever cut the grass or cut your hair and you leave it too long, it's harder to do if it's about getting that balance. It's about little and often, regular. And it's the same with this. It's about every single signal that is sent in interactions, in conduct when people are connecting, that make the difference to the way those brains assess their environment. And we call it trust, but what that means is increased levels of oxytocin that are available, which changes the whole chemical balance in the brain around dopamine and serotonin as well, and cortisol levels. That's what we've got to affect positively and get those chemicals in a better balance if we're going to get a balance between the human bit and the logical, practical bit to be manifest and realized in practice. Hope that makes sense. Right, okay, I'm looking at the time, and we normally try and keep this about 20 minutes. I know we've got free rein to go a little bit longer if we want, but if we kind of whiz through the last few slides then, it's a strong statement, and it doesn't have to just be lean. It can be change, it can be project management, it can be leadership approaches, styles, whatever. I've just written a paper on that. If you do things and it triggers an aversive defensive response in the other brain, you will not get the outcomes you want from that other brain, because that brain is designed to survive efficiently. And even if it pays lip service to what you're saying, it's doing that to survive the environment where you're the boss and that other brain's got to survive you as a threat. So if you ignore neurology, you ignore brain science, things will not work out how you want them to, guaranteed. If you understand brain science, the corollary to that is that it enables everything we do to be better. It doesn't matter if you work under the banners of Agile, Six Sigma, use DMAIC, use PDCA, whether you're running your strategy from a balanced scorecard or EFQM or Hoshinkanri point of view. If you understand the brains of the people involved in and how those systems, how those artifacts in the world trigger those brains to respond, you will design your solutions in ways that get better results from people, absolutely guaranteed without fail. So, it will address misaligned beliefs, it will address emotional resistance, it will reduce cognitive overload. And if we think about glucose energy and how, any kind of stress that triggers cortisol is metabolically taxing for the brain, and what the brain's trying to do to control that, you very quickly can make connections in your own mind about if this is going to stress people out and use a lot of glucose energy, they're going to avoid it, and therefore how to avoid it becomes the work that the brain's doing, not how to execute a new task or a new process or system. All of that is, quite often discussed under the banner of psychological safety, so that improves as well. And this whole kind of locus of control type, internal, external locus of control, where we feel the world happens to us, or we've got agency over the world and we make our own choices, and luck and all that stuff comes to that. All links into learned helplessness that we learn, you know, by conditioned response in control-based environments to give up trying. You know, and you go back to Pavlov and dogs and not escaping electrocution to really sort of prove the point there. And those parts of animal brains are the same in human brains. We learn to be helpless if we're conditioned to not have a voice, to not be valued, to not be heard. And the way we've designed many of our systems, leadership styles and control mechanisms guarantees that we're not heard and not valued. And we wonder why people are disengaged. So, you know, if you come along with 5S and 8 waste elimination and DMAIC and Kaizen and Kanban and train them as tools, and you get people to do TAC calculations, none of that is sending any signals to the brain that they're any safer, or that the boss is going to be any less of a git to them on the Monday morning when he's been looking at the numbers over on Sunday. You know, those are the things we've got to address and deal with. Not, and tools just doesn't fix it, but changing what people believe to be good and to shift their beliefs about what works does, and that's what BTFA does. So, anything to add, Levent, before I move on?
No.
Good. Right. Okay. So again, last couple of slides. Let's wrap it up. I'll let you do this one. Go on, just so we're taking it in turns. Over to you.
In fact, we talked about this. With the online course that we are providing and the following programs, we help organizations to build the beliefs behind Lean, what we call principles at Toyota. You know, they have 5 principles, basically: respect, teamwork, challenge, Kaizen, Genchi, Genbutsu. But if you try to follow the same way as Toyota, you have to start with respect. But when we start explaining respect, everybody says they are already respectful. So what can you change about it? Instead, we are using neuroscience to show them how brains react when you act about something. So when they understand how brains work, they can connect with other brains, they can create synergies. This is what we teach in BTFA. And BTFA works as an enabler for OPEX, Lean, and continuous improvement.
Brilliant. Thank you, mate. I think I'm still on there. Yeah, good. So I think, you know, again, what differentiates us, because we do feel we're different. If you go to the bottom line there, under ducks in a row, Levent, you know, and I have both got 40 years experience in industry. You know, Levent with nearly 20 years in Toyota, me leading change across Europe, basically focused on Lean, TPS type and Six Sigma type transformation programs. We've both worked as operations directors. You know, we're not trainers. We've discovered through failures and you know, sort of trialing and testing what works and what doesn't work. Whilst learning psychology and neuroscience and the people bit more deeply, what works and what doesn't. And you know, I think we talk about motivation, you know, and how do incentives and motivating people, going back to the top of these bullet points here. And a lot of time, you know, if you're doing that without understanding the reward mechanism and how dopamine has an impact on the dopaminergic mesolimbic pathway and, you know, the different parts of the brain, you're guessing. So it becomes theoretical, and therefore you're going to make mistakes. And there's a lot of stuff out there that we've analyzed and gone, oh, okay, that's not actually going to work because of the way the brains function. And of course, all the time, what's being taught isn't directly linked and supporting what brains do. You're not going to get that behavior change. And ultimately, people doing things differently at work so they're more effective and efficient is behavior change, right? And you only get that if you shift beliefs. So that's kind of what makes us different. We're focused on what we see to be the human root cause of everything we've seen over the last 40 or 50 years. And the only way we can do that is with neuroscience. It's just, we haven't got the language to describe it in any other way. So that's really the summary of that slide. You know, what we do is based on experience, not theory or academia. It's neuroscience based. We've converted it all into very simple language, so it's dead easy to understand for anybody. You know, it's taken 25 years of heavy lifting to do that, but we've got there. And it does lead to sustainable transformation, because that 5S bit, the sustained bit, isn't required because people believe in what they're doing and they want to do it together. So really. I mean, you know, what does it look like from us? It's online training. We meet once a week to have deep reflective sessions, and that's what people say they get just as much from as the content. It's based on video lessons. It's a story we tell in a video format, in cartoon format, so it's dead easy for the brain to assimilate to and integrate. It comes with multiple templates. We have these, like I say, weekly office hours. We build a community of practice, and it's all, you know, we then look at real cases with our clients and help them apply BTFA in practice. And we've seen multiple projects suddenly become a lot more efficient, effective, and deliver better results faster as soon as we start openly addressing the human bits, the barriers that have been there up until then, you know, and masked by conversations around processes and systems. So that's what we do, that's how it's delivered, and that's how it works. So Levent, over to you again, mate. Last couple of slides and we're really done.
So it's a repetition, but if we are able to connect with other brains, you're using BTFA knowledge, communication, trust, and strategy execution, ownership, and stress will be much better.
Brilliant. So final takeaway. That's it. I mean, in summary, let's wrap it all up. Everything we've said in a nutshell. And I'm just going to read from the slide. Lean succeeds when employees are engaged, not when tools are deployed. I mean, that's a strong, powerful statement, but it's absolutely bang on. And that's, like I say, it's based on 30 plus years, 35 years of leading change based on what was originally world-class manufacturing when I was first taught it, you know, after total quality management and quality circles, that then became lean when Womack and Jones wrote their brilliant book. But, you know, it is the case. We have got this new science. We can now prove that that statement is factual. Lean succeeds, or TPS, or you manage to get a Toyota type culture of high performance when employees are engaged. When they're not, you don't. Simple as that. And tools, when you deploy tools, it does not necessarily engage people. Quite often, the whole process, the project management, the forced addition of more things to do on top of an already busy life disengages even further. So we've got to get the way we approach training right, the way we approach leadership and development right, and then we do get that engagement, which leads to these fantastic results. So, you know, again, more bold statements. We believe very, very strongly, and this is why we act the way we do, that BTFA is the missing link. That, you know, Toyota intuitively understood that. Again, we could go off for the next 2 hours and talk about Japanese culture and the deeper meaning of the words and how much semantic meaning is built into each kanji character that, you know, Japanese people just understand intuitively because it's been part of the way they were educated at school, part of the way their parents spoke to them, and the way their brains have been formed through neuroplasticity and neurogenesis all of their life. So, you know, it is intuitive for the indigenous Japanese people in Toyota. Toyota managed to replicate that globally, you know, through experiments like NUMI in the States, and it's understood internally, but it just hasn't translated very well externally. And we've got a lot of people that have looked in from outside to try and make sense of it without neuroscience language, and it's still fallen short. So what we honestly do believe that BTFA is that missing link. So if any of that makes sense, sounds appealing, can help anybody that's out there, and as you know, especially we tend to find most of our clients have got 20 or 30 years of experience of leading change, realize there's something major missing, and kind of go, eureka, hurrah, you know, you've found something when they hear about BTFA. If any of that makes sense, then obviously we're here to help. Do reach out. You've got the email address there at the bottom, and we look forward to hearing from you. Last words, Levent, anything else to say?
No, thank you so much for attending our webinar. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, guys. Yeah, nice to see you all. And I can see a couple of names I recognise there. So look forward to catching up soon. But for now, that's it from us. Cheers all. See you soon. Bye.